And we are now recording, so welcome to our YouTube watchers as well. My name is Jamie Vibach, and I am the Will County Director with the Conservation Foundation. Welcome. So you know this is a webinar format, so everyone's muted, your cameras are off. If you're eating your lunch while joining us today, or maybe you're still sitting around in your pajamas, either way, no judgment here. I can't see you. Hopefully you can see and hear me okay. So this webinar is going to be recorded for everyone to enjoy later. It'll be shared on our YouTube channel. So please feel free to check out any of our past webinars, also saved to our YouTube channel. If you have a question, please use the Q&A box. That lets everybody see it. Also makes it easier for me to find them all. Questions can sometimes get lost in the chat, but I'll answer them whenever I see them as we're going along. It's a little tricky for me when I'm doing these by myself to always see the questions at the time, but I will try and make sure I get to everybody's questions and in time to wrap up at 2 o'clock today. So for your safety, you should only be able to see what I post in chat, but just in case I missed a setting, don't click any links other than what I may post. And on the TCF side of things, these webinars are offered to the public for free through the Conservation Foundation. However, we do encourage you to consider a donation or a membership. The more people we have attending these, the more it costs us to run them. So at the end of the webinar, you're going to be taken to a page with a whole bunch of resources. So great things about creating butterfly gardens, rain gardens, our native plant brochures, all kinds of great resources and things you might use. But our virtual tip jar is there as well. So if you're enjoying these webinars, I do encourage you to donate to help keep us running. Can also, there's a little checkbox to become a member as well so that you can enjoy our wide variety of members only stuff. As you may have noticed, we are joining you from a new day today. Instead of our usual Monday, Thursday format, which was quite honestly getting a little tricky to keep up with, we are now going to be on Wednesdays. So webinar Wednesdays. So our first one I'm super excited about today only because I love monarchs. And so it gives me a chance to geek out with you guys again about butterflies. So next Wednesday, August 12th, we are going to have another special guest who's going to be talking about bringing hummingbirds to your yard. So super excited about that. That's going to be another good one as well. So I'm looking forward to that. All right. So with that, I am going to share my screen so that we can start our presentation. Here we go. All right. And unlike my usual format, it's not going to be all PowerPoint here because I'm going to take a break to introduce you to some special guests, as you may have figured out by now. So once again, I am Jamie Vibach, the Will County Director. That is my contact information there. Email is the easiest way to get a hold of me since I'm not in my office. I do get my voicemails though if you do have any questions and you want to leave me a voicemail. But email is always the easiest way to get a hold of me. So with the Conservation Foundation, this is our mission. Our goal is to protect and improve the health of our communities, protecting water, protecting land, and doing all of that because not only does it help our ecosystems and our friends, the birds and bugs and bunnies, it also helps improve our own health as well. And we have become accredited in the last year or two, which is a really big deal. It's a national organization that took a look at how we do things and said, yep, you're doing them right. So that was a really big deal for us to get. And then here you can see the work that we do and where we do it. For those of you outside of Illinois, Cook County is where Chicago is. We work mainly in the collar counties around there. So if you're outside of that area, that's fine. You can still call us and we'll do what we can. Normally we'll try and put you in touch with a land trust that's closer to you though. So, all right. And I just love this joke. This makes me giggle every time I see it. What gives you butterflies every single time, no matter how many times you experience it? Buying caterpillars. Or in my case, finding caterpillars. All right, so to get started here, let's see if you can identify monarchs. So take a look at the pictures. I will give you a hint. There are actually 3 different species in these pictures. See if you can find the monarchs. Got your guesses? You think you know it? All right, here we go. So top left and bottom right are our monarch butterflies. Viceroys, which are one of the best known mimics in the entire animal kingdom. We've got those, if you notice, they've got that black stripe running along their hind wing that the monarch doesn't have. That's the easiest way to identify a viceroy. And then the queen, here in Illinois, we are, other than maybe the far south Illinois, we're really too far north to get queens. Occasionally they'll come as far north as maybe like, you know, the southern part of Missouri. But they're really more of a southern species. So those of you joining us from Georgia, you may see queens every now and then, but it's really kind of cool how their caterpillars look so similar to monarch caterpillars. They're in the same genus, as, you know, if you look at them, they look fairly similar, but they are different species. So what do monarchs eat? Well, depends on whether we're talking about the adults or the caterpillars. So monarch caterpillars will only eat things in the milkweed family. Here in Illinois, you know, I've heard different numbers. I've heard anywhere from 7 to 35 different species of milkweed. Generally, you know, there's 3 fairly common ones that we see. The first is just quite simply called common milkweed up here in the upper right. Common milkweed is the one that gets really tall, 6-7 feet tall. It's got those big globe-shaped clusters of flowers on the end that, by the way, smell absolutely heavenly if you come across them. Most of the ones in my yard, at least, are kind of bloomed out by now, but if you still see some in bloom, go stick your nose in them because, man, they smell heavenly. Down in the lower left, that's swamp milkweed. Swamp milkweed is blooming right now, and it's another really pretty one. Doesn't usually get quite as tall as common milkweed. Depends on how happy it is, but generally I say that one gets about waist high, though, you know, it can get a little bit taller if it's in a really good spot. And green milkweed, a little less common there in the lower center. And in the lower right is butterfly weed. That's the one we really recommend people to plant in their yards just because it's so gorgeous. It's really much better behaved, to be honest, than common milkweed. And those orange flowers are just really, really striking. So those are different types of milkweed that we have here. If you live outside of the Chicago area, there are probably some other types of milkweed that are native to your area as well. So do a little bit of research. The information is out there and it's readily available. So if you're looking to plant milkweed in your yard, and I highly recommend that you do, then find the kind that are native to your yard and plant them there. Tropical milkweed is a little bit trickier, especially up here in the northern climates, because it's not native here. It grows a little bit longer than it should, and it can cause some problems. So we do recommend you leave tropical where it is native to. Adult monarchs, on the other hand, will nectar from a variety of different types of flowers. So in addition to milkweed flowers, they'll go all over the place. So lots and lots of different things that the adults will eat. All right, let's talk about the life cycle here for a minute. And this is, you can kind of see from the pictures here, we've got a female laying an egg, and then you can see just how tiny that egg is there in the lower right. And then lower left. And then in the upper right, see how it has that dark part at the top? That means this egg is just about ready to hatch. I'm going to stop my share for just a second here because I have an egg that I can show you. So I'm going to hold this up to my camera. Can you see right by the tip of my finger that kind of white pale dot there? Sorry, my camera's not better, but you can kind of get the idea. See that there? That is a monarch egg. That's exactly what it looks like. That's exactly how big it is not. They are very, very tiny. But if you are going to raise them, that's what you want to look for. Generally, females lay them on the undersides of the leaves, and they hatch out in a couple of days. And I can show you this little guy here. You can see, I know my camera is kind of fuzzy. I don't have the clearest camera here, but if you can see where the hole is, let's see where we get to see it the best. There we go. And just to the right, that hole, that little line there, that is a caterpillar. That guy hatched within the last 12 hours. They're super tiny. They're about a third the size of a grain of rice when they first come out like that. So then, after about 2 weeks, they get much larger. This is the guy I've been trying to keep my eye on here. So this guy is just about ready to make a chrysalis. He is so ready. He is climbing all over. He is not happy with where I put him right there, and he really wants to go someplace else where he can go start making his chrysalis. So I will get him, as soon as we're done here, back into a container where he will be much happier. So you can see how they go from about a third the size of a grain of rice to, you know, almost the size of my finger in just 2 weeks. That's because all they do is eat and poop. That's it. That is the entire goal of the is to eat and poop. All right, so let's go back to my screen. And let's see, this is where we left off. There we go. All right, so you saw how tiny the egg was. Now, we call these stages that they go through instars. So you can see they start from really, really tiny. And if you're trying to find these little tiny guys, look for leaf damage. If, you know, you're like me and getting a little bit older and the eyes aren't quite there, look for leaf damage, because those little caterpillars, those little teeny tiny guys, will always eat in the shape of a C. So they look for that little C-shaped hole in the leaf, and that's how you can find the little teeny guys. I just love how they look when they're so tiny. Up in that upper left-hand corner, you see they've just got this like gigantic head on this little body. It just cracks me up every time. They grow into it eventually, just like toddlers, but just this gigantic head on this little teeny body. But they go through different instars. So the first instar is that one teeny tiny stage. They're only in that for maybe a day or two. And then they shed their skin, just like a snake does. So they shed their skin so that they can grow. So they go from that first instar, second instar, third instar. By the time they get up to that fourth instar, they're really getting to be big chonker guys, right? And then fifth instar, man, that's when they are really, really big. So, and they can eat, let me tell you. So now this guy's climbed down onto a leaf. When I say they eat, I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute again. This was a milkweed leaf. You can see this guy on here, how much a guy who is this big, this fifth instar stage, they will eat one of these leaves a day, at least, sometimes two, depending on how big the leaf is. They eat a lot. So if you're going to raise them, just know you need to have a constant source of milkweed, because, man, they will go through it. They will eat a ton. And I know I'm on these monarch groups on Facebook, and you always see these people like, oh, I brought them in. I didn't realize how much they were going to eat. I'm out of milkweed now. What do I do? So make sure you don't end up in that situation there, and make sure you have enough to feed them. So let's go back to here. All right. So that's the larval stage. That's the caterpillar stage, right? Larva just means insect baby. All right, now I'm going to see if I can get this to play here. Here we go. So now they have to make their chrysalis. And if you are anything like me, up until maybe 5 years ago, you have no idea how this happens. I remember, I mean, I basically had a master's degree, and I thought they just kind of spun the chrysalis like a cocoon, right? They just sort of make the silk and they make it, and oh no, no, no. This might be one of the grossest things you see today. It's not really gross, but just so you know. So they hang upside down in the sort of J shape when they're ready to make their chrysalis. And then you can see they're hanging upside down by those back feet on a little silk pad that they've made. And they're going to shed their skin just like a snake does. You see how it splits right there at the bottom? That part coming out, that's the chrysalis. And that's just their shed skin that's going to be moving up and up this whole time. And yeah, check that out. How weird is that? Right? How it just kind of moves up. And then underneath that is the chrysalis. That chrysalis was underneath that skin the whole time. Oops. I messed that up. Come on. Shoot. All right. Let's move this along here to the next part. Of course, I had to touch stuff and mess it up. There we go. Okay. So you can see that old shed skin is up at the top, and then check out that chrysalis there on the left. Cool kind of time lapse thing going here. So yeah, that's what that looks like when it's all done, is that there on the left. It looks like something an artist made. It's so cool looking. Now you're going to see, after about 2 weeks, anywhere from 10 to 14 days, the butterfly is going to come out of the chrysalis. So that green chrysalis is going to turn translucent. It's going to be clear, and then the butterfly is just going to come out. The crazy origami on those wings just really gets me. And that chrysalis, the outside sort of skin on that chrysalis just cracks open, the butterfly comes out, and there it is. It's going to hang and let the wings dry for a couple of hours, and then it's going to be ready to fly away. All right. Let me just check here. All right. So Laurel asks, I've never been able to find a caterpillar on my common milkweed, but I've noticed some areas where something is eaten. Our monarch caterpillar is the only thing that eats the leaves. Great question, Laurel. The answer is no. And we'll talk about this in just a minute. Milkweed is actually a whole community of things. So as an adult, you can see the chrysalis, and sorry to keep stopping and starting again, but I think this is worth seeing in person if you can. So there is one of the chrysalis that I have. I was really hoping this one was going to come out today in time for us, and it didn't. Of course, I had 2 come out on Monday. You know, big jerks, they couldn't wait just 2 more days. But you can see that chrysalis there, that butterfly is forming. Now, after they make that chrysalis, the bodies inside just turn to goo. And I don't know how else to describe it, but they do. Their bodies just turn to goo inside that chrysalis, and somehow that all just sort of coalesces to become a butterfly. There are certain things that are analogous to their organs and different organs along the way, but for the most part, it's just kind of goo in there. And we have, as scientists, we haven't known really what was going on in there for a while. It wasn't until they started putting them in an MRI machine that they could actually see what was going on in there. And for example, these gold dots that you see down here, these line up with the spiracles, which is how a caterpillar breathes. It's like air transport mechanisms. And that's what those gold dots are. So that's where they line up with. So, you know, who knows really what all is going on in there, but, you know, their bodies just turn to this soup inside there, and somehow a butterfly manages to come out afterwards. It's so, so amazing. So you can see down this darker chrysalis down here, how that it goes clear, and you can start to see the wings in there. And then this is usually a sign that in the next 24 hours, a butterfly is going to come out. So now the butterfly hangs upside down, as I mentioned. For the wings to dry, they have to pump those wings full of blood, and they're real wet when they come out. They expel a fluid they call meconium, so kind of like a baby, you know, after a baby is born, they have that same kind of, it's just kind of leftover fluid that they just sort of expel. The wings dry and they harden, they fill with blood. Their proboscis is in 2 pieces when it comes out, and it's sort of got to zip together. It's really, really bizarre. So, and then we have an adult butterfly. So it's this hugely like traumatic experience that they go through for this. It's unbelievable. And I can show you here, this was actually one of the ones that I let go just the other day. And this is a male. And I know it's a male because you see these dots down here on the lower hind wings. That's actually a pheromone patch, but that means that it's a male. Females, these dark lines in the wings, there's my pointer, these dark lines here are a little bit thicker, and they don't have those dots. So It's how you can tell the difference between a male and a female monarch. And these guys make an absolutely amazing journey. So we have about 4 generations here. And that last generation is what they call the Methuselah generation. So this generation, most of the adults live for 2 weeks. So they're 2 weeks as a caterpillar, about 2 weeks in a chrysalis, about 2 weeks as an adult. This last generation, however, they become the adult form, and then they just sort of stop aging. So it would be like if you became, you turned 16 and all of a sudden you stopped aging at all. How cool would that be, right? Kind of. Anyway, so they sort of stop aging, and that last generation, they call it diapause. And what that means is, again, like they stop aging, and they're going to fly from here and all over, the eastern, for the most part, United States and Midwest, and they're going to fly down to Mexico. There is a forest outside of Mexico City that's full of a type of tree called an oyamel tree. And that's where they overwinter. So this little insect who's never been there before manages to fly from the Chicago area all the way down to Mexico. We're still not entirely certain how they find their way there. There's some indication that they use the sun to sort of position themselves. There's some thought that it could be, availability of nectar sources. They're just kind of, as things start to die off up here, they sort of follow it down there, but that doesn't really explain it either. It's absolutely fascinating. But they managed to make it all the way down to Mexico, where they congregate in these trees for the next couple of months. And that picture on the right there, those are all monarchs just clinging to these trees. They gather by the millions in these trees, turning the trees basically orange. And they might flutter around a little bit, go grab a drink from a puddle nearby or something. But for the most part, they just spend their days kind of hovering, or not hovering, but hanging out in these trees. There are tours that you can take to go visit these sites, eco tours that help support the communities where these trees are. It also helps to prevent the illegal logging, which is a big problem in these forests. When they cut these trees down, all of a sudden the monarchs have nowhere to go anymore. So that's another thing that's threatening their populations. So it is totally a bucket list thing of mine that I want to go down to see one of these sites. And then after a couple months, they're going to turn around, they're going to come right back. And they're going to get to about Texas. And those butterflies that left here in the fall will lay their eggs and die. So their development kind of kicks up again. They lay their eggs, they die. That generation goes caterpillar, chrysalis, adult. Those adults are going to start heading back this way. About the time they hit Missouri or so, they're going to lay their eggs, die. New generation comes out. So it's actually like the great-grandchildren of the ones who left who are going to make it back here, which is just so crazy to me, because how do they know where to go? Like, if I were just to start walking, I would never make it to Mexico for many reasons. But and here's this little insect that just has it in them to make it all the way down there to somewhere they've never been, and then start heading back to a place where they've never been. It just blows my mind. Just blows my mind. So then, you have your California populations that kind of go out to the coast and back. They don't make quite as big a journey. And then there's Florida populations that we're not entirely certain what they do. We think they come up to the Panhandle area. We're not really certain though. But yeah, it's really crazy, this journey that they make. So if you want to bring them to your yard, you got to give them what they want. So this goes with any animal, any critter you're trying to bring to your yard, or conversely get to leave your yard. Give them what they want: food, water, and shelter. So planting milkweed will bring you monarchs. Even if you're not seeing them, these guys are masters of camouflage. I tell you, I go out looking for them and I miss them all the time. And sometimes even these huge, gigantic, you know, 4th and 5th instar ones will be right in front of you and you won't see it. You wouldn't think they would camouflage that well. It's insane. So providing food for them, building butterfly gardens, great way to help encourage them to come to your yard. And it doesn't mean just plant a giant stand of common milkweed and you're done. From what I've read, they like actually smaller patches, but smaller patches interspersed with other things, nectar plants, things like that to eat. So, yes, Mary Jones says, when they reach Missouri, do they spread out to the Midwest? Yeah, they don't just come here, they go kind of all over the place. I'm just using us as an example just because that's what we think in terms of, you know, that's where I am. So that's kind of just what I'm thinking in terms of. So, all right. So as I mentioned before, milkweed is actually a community. So if you go out and look at these milkweed plants, you're not just going to see monarchs, you're going to see all kinds of things. On the left there, that's a photo I took, that's why it's so bad, of a hummingbird moth. And hummingbird moths are super cool. They're huge. It's a type of moth, but it's about the size of a hummingbird. They're crazy. So that's one that I saw hanging out on my milkweed. Top center there, that is a candy striped leafhopper. They're beautiful, right? They're that kind of turquoise and reddish color. They're amazing. I love them. I see them on milkweed all the time. Milkweed beetles. Get calls about these all the time too, and whether they're hurting their milkweed, they're not. You'll see them all the time. Pretty much anything that eats milkweed, for the most part, is going to be red and black or orange and black. Why? Who knows? But as monarchs, and I'm assuming some other insects eat the milkweed, milkweed actually contains some toxins. So they're called cardiac glycosides. And those cardiac glycosides, if we were to eat them, would damage our hearts. Obviously, you're not going to eat a ton of it because it tastes terrible. Not the voice of experience, just what I've heard. The latex and everything that's in there just tastes awful. And so nobody's going to eat enough of it to really cause a lot of damage. And that's the plant's defense, right? Well, caterpillars, rather than digesting that and having those problems, it actually stores those compounds in the fat in their bodies. And by storing those compounds, that's what makes them poisonous as adults. And that's again, that's their main defense. So, sorry, I'm looking at some of the questions that we have here. Should we worry about controlling the yellow milkweed mite population in our garden? Those are aphids, and that's actually the eggs that are there on the right. Those are aphid eggs. They are a part of the milkweed community. They make your plants look a little bit ugly. They secrete a honeydew that attracts ants. But they're part of the community. They're not really going to hurt the plants at all. If you're really concerned, you don't like how they look, you want them off, you can hand squish them. You can use water, like wash them off with like high spray water. Just make sure there's no caterpillars or eggs or other things like that that you're going to accidentally get in the process. Let's see. Another question we have here. Problem a couple of times with an insect eating a caterpillar. It had a sharp point on it. Looks like it stabbed the caterpillar and ate its insides. I didn't see anything in the enclosure with them, but it happened a few times in the same year. Looks, yeah, there's a couple of things that will eat the caterpillars. You know, they've got a lot of predators. Assassin bugs are one. Spiders will suck out the insides of the eggs. There are also a couple of the word is escaping me, things that will there's a type of wasp that will lay its eggs actually inside the caterpillar. Parasite, that's the word I was looking for. It's a couple of different parasites that will lay their eggs inside the caterpillars and will cause problems with them. So yeah, there are actually many things. Out in the wild, I've heard about 1 in 10 caterpillars will actually make it to an adult. When I bring them inside, obviously I have a much better success rate because I'm protecting them from all of that. And to answer another question, yes, I do raise mine inside. I just don't really have I don't have a good way to raise them outside where they're not going to roast. So I bring them inside. As for the University of Illinois study, or the Monarch Watch study, or no, it was U of I. That study, there's a lot of issues with how that study was done. And there are many other scientists who study monarchs who have criticized that study because of the methodology of it, saying it doesn't really show what they say it shows. First off, they bought their eggs from a grower effectively. And so it's kind of like they used farm raised caterpillars and not ones that are naturally occurring. The ones that are farm raised historically have had issues with inbreeding and genetic abnormalities and things like that. So there could be a whole lot of different things going on with that one. There's a lot going on with it. We are not going to save the monarch populations by raising them inside, but I'll cover a little bit more of that in a minute. But yeah, back to Megan. Sorry if I cut out there. Larger caterpillars will eat eggs. They'll eat really anything that gets in their way. They're just eating machines. So if you are keeping them together, make sure you keep different size ones separate. They'll eat eggs. They'll eat smaller ones kind of accidentally. It's not like they're targeting them. They just sort of get in the way. All right, moving along. So again, we talked about raising them. We are not going to save the populations by raising them ourselves. We just can't. We don't have enough of an impact doing it, and we're not going to. But what raising them does is it helps with education. It helps people to connect better with them. I'll be honest, I mean, yeah, I thought monarchs were cool. And then I started raising them, and all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, these things are awesome. And I wanted to learn more about them, and I wanted to learn more about how I could help them. And I started planting more milkweed in my yard. And I taught my son about it. My son learned all about it. And now he talks to his friends about it. It's all about education. So again, when you think of it more in that respect, that's really more what we're doing. Obviously, we want to raise them as best we can and do the best job that we can to treat them right. But at the same time, just know that, you know, don't make yourself crazy doing it. You don't have to raise hundreds and hundreds of them. I know some people who do and they like it, but it's very stressful. The more you get, you know, the more containers you have to have, and the more space it takes up, and the more time it takes you to do it. So I have cut back a lot on how many I raise because we do it for education. And so I always like to have a couple on hand during the summer for education programs, for the summer camps that we do at TCF, and just because it's kind of fun. But I know I don't need to go out there and save every single one out there that I see. As you can see me there in the middle, naturalist in her habitat. My husband took that picture of me just because he thought it was funny. But that mesh hamper over there is a great type of container to use for them. It's really easy to get in and out of. They're fairly inexpensive. They're easy to clean. And that mesh side there gives, when you have adults, if they fall down, they can easily climb back up again. On plastic containers, it's a little bit harder for them to climb back up the sides. And then I have the page there there are several Facebook groups that have tons of information. If you are interested in trying to raise some monarchs on your own and learning more about how to do it, there are several Facebook groups that are really good. That Beautiful Monarch group is a great one. They have a files section on their Facebook page that has just tons of information. Information on the study that we referenced earlier, the rebuttal to that study, just all kinds of really good information. Information on problems that you might encounter raising them, both any of the predators that are out there, the parasites that we mentioned, like trichogramma wasps and OE, which is a type of, I forget if it's a, I don't think it's not a bacteria, it's not a virus, I forget exactly what it is, but basically it's something that infects the caterpillars and can cause problems in high levels in the adults. So anyway, so that in case you encounter these issues, you know what, it also helps you to realize exactly what kinds of products we use and their effects on the insect communities. A lot of times people will show these caterpillars dying these gruesome deaths and saying, what happened? Well, it turns out their neighbor sprayed an insecticide in their yard that drifted over, and when the caterpillar ate those leaves, it died, because that's what insecticides do. You know, they don't just get the bad bugs, they get whatever happens to get in their way. So if you're having your yard sprayed regularly for insects, Japanese beetles, things like that, just know that it's also affecting things like monarchs and the other good bugs that we want to bring to our yard as well. That also goes for grub killers. Grubs are insect larvae. So if you're putting down grub killers in your yard, you're also killing off lightning bugs. So again, raising them really gets you thinking about what you're doing in your own yard. So if you really, one of the best things that you can do is to put in a butterfly garden. If you want to bring butterflies to your yard, plant a butterfly garden. And one of my favorite expressions is a rising tide lifts all ships. And in this case, what that means is when we plant milkweed and do other things to our yard to help protect monarch butterflies, we're actually protecting a lot of other things as well. Other things that maybe aren't as cute or aren't as interesting as monarchs, but are still deserving of protection, are still important pollinators, and it's going to help everybody. So by helping monarchs, you can see on the milkweed down there in the bottom, I believe that's a checker spot, another type of butterfly there that likes the nectar, doesn't use the milkweed as a host plant, something that the caterpillars will eat, but it does use it as a nectaring plant. So having all of these different things in your butterfly garden will help lots of different pollinators, not just monarchs. So when you're putting together your pollinator garden, you want to have dark colored rocks in there. That gives them a place to warm up early in the morning. You want to have a water source, and having sand in it's really good because there are minerals and things in the sand that'll leach out into the water. And those minerals are things that butterflies are looking for. They don't get them from their usual diet. So salts and things like that, that's why you see them on puddles in the street. They're getting those minerals and other things that they need. So having a little shallow watering area so they don't drown, but also to give them some of those minerals as well. And then a nice sunny spot with lots of flowers that they can come nectar at. And then some shelter. Now I'm kind of kidding with that picture. You're not building that big shelter just for the butterflies, but having areas like shrubs and things where they can go and sort of hang out when it gets too hot or if it's raining or super windy, kind of gives them a place to take some shelter if they need to. And then you can just add these native plants to your existing landscaping. Nobody's saying you have to go out and create a whole new garden with it if you don't have the space or the time to do that. Really, all you need to do is just add some of these plants to your existing landscape. So Coreopsis up there in the upper left, Liatris or Blazing Star there in the middle, Yarrow is there in the top right. If you watched my last webinar, I always get these two confused. I'm not sure if that's cardinal flower or royal catchfly. Either one, both of them are bright red and very pretty. Butterfly weed down there in the bottom, remember that's a type of Asclepias, that's a type of milkweed that they like to lay their eggs on. And then in the bottom there, that is indigo, wild indigo, which is a really, really pretty kind of shrub-like plant. I'm adding some of that to my yard soon too. But again, all of these 5 genus support about 75% of the insect life that we have here in the Chicago area. Just these 5 genus. So rudbeckias, or the black-eyed Susans, asters, milkweeds, goldenrods, and oaks. Anything in these families is great. Asters are especially important, I feel, because they're one of the few things that bloom in the fall. And so as you remember, those monarchs are migrating in the fall. They've got to have enough energy to get from here all the way to Mexico. So they need stuff to eat. So having plants that bloom in the fall does that. There's not a whole lot blooming, but if you plant asters and things like that that bloom in the fall, that will give them the nectar that they need to get all the way down to Mexico. So we are kind of coming to you through our Conservation at Home program, where we encourage homeowners to plant native plants in their yard, like the ones that we just discussed, putting in butterfly gardens, rain gardens, all kinds of, basically anything involving native plants in your yard to help these pollinators. Through this program, we come out to your yard for free, and we'll do consultations. If you are outside of our area, we can help get you to a land trust or someplace near you that can help. If you are interested in becoming more involved with the Conservation Foundation, you can become a member. As I said, when we close out of this webinar, you'll be at our resources page. Lots of great information on there, more information about native plants, rain gardens, pollinator gardens, but you can also become a member. If you're local, you can visit our McDonald farm in Naperville or our Dixon-Merced farm in Montgomery. Our farm in Naperville is actually a working farm. It's an organic farm, and coming up in October, Farmer Jason has promised me that he will do a webinar with me. So if you're interested in learning more about our farm and the things that go on our organic farm, stay tuned. But yeah, you can come visit, check it out. We've got restored prairie, we've got solar panels, we've got a green roof. We got all kinds of good stuff at that farm. You can also follow us on social media and get your yard certified through our Conservation at Home program. And with that, I will go to any questions that we have. So let's see, here we go. All right. So yeah, the caterpillars that I raise, I do keep them inside. I have different containers for the different size groups and to keep the eggs separate and all of that. So, I keep them in my kitchen away from, I don't use oils, diffuse oils or anything like that in my house. I use more natural cleaners. So hopefully they're not being exposed to chemicals and things like that, because a lot of that stuff is actually really, really bad for them. But again, I only raise a couple. I generally have pretty good success with them. I didn't mention this, but there is also the tagging program. Monarch Watch out of Kansas does that, where you can buy these little tags, and they're just like little, very small stickers that have a unique code on them, and you affix it to the wing. It doesn't hurt them. Thousands and thousands and thousands of these have been tagged, and they're recovered in Mexico and in other places. So they are making it down there. We know for a fact that ones that have been captive raised make it down to Mexico through this tagging program. So there are lots of different places to get information on this as well. Let's see, answered that one. When my milkweed is flowering, I often see literally tons of very tiny flying insects attracted to the blooms. What might these be? Oh, lots of things. Again, as we said, it's a whole community. So there are these little things called syrphid flies that when you were a kid, maybe you called them sweat bees. I've seen them around the flowers. I've seen, all different kinds of things. There are some of these wasps that are predators of monarchs or parasites of monarchs. Tachinid flies, they almost look like a housefly. And I've seen them around there. wasps. I've seen all kinds of wasps all over my milkweed. Those really big, kind of iridescent blue, black ones. They're all around there too. Yeah, there's all kinds of things. It's really amazing the number of insects that use milkweed, use the flowers. I've seen spiders on my milkweed set up little webs for traps because there are so many other little insects there. You know, and spiders will eat the caterpillars too. They'll eat the eggs. So I would say, you know, if you're seeing, I hear a lot from people, like they see caterpillars on their milkweed and then all of a sudden they're all gone and they think, oh no, something ate it. Maybe. They actually get around. You would be surprised at how far they can go, especially when it's time for them to make their chrysalis. They don't want to be on the milkweed anymore because their brothers and sisters are all eating it. So they want to go someplace else. So, you know, they're going to climb up some other plant or a structure, or, you know, you see chrysalis on these Facebook groups. You see pictures from people everywhere that they have made their chrysalis. You know, the most ridiculous little structures, they're everywhere. So yeah, so don't worry if you see them and then suddenly don't. There's a really good chance they just went off to make their chrysalis somewhere. Last week had 3 caterpillars in my bronze fennel. I think they were probably swallowtail rather than monarchs. Absolutely. And is there a way to tell the difference between the 2 types? Well, first of all, where you find them is a big clue. Monarchs are not going to be on fennel, but it is one of the prime food sources for swallowtails. So that right there tells me that's probably what they were. Secondly, swallowtail caterpillars, if you look at pictures of them side by side, and believe me, there are plenty, if you just do a quick Google search, there's plenty of pictures of showing them side by side. Swallowtails are very green, and you know, a little more polka dotty than monarchs are. Monarchs are yellow, black, white stripes. Swallowtails tend to be a little more green. So yeah, they can be a little fun too if you kind of very gently poke them a little bit, annoy them a little bit. They'll shoot out this orange, it almost looks like a tongue, and that's basically them saying that they're annoyed with you. It's hilarious to see. Okay, don't annoy the caterpillars, but if accidentally you happen to, they'll shoot that little orange thing out there, and it's kind of funny. Recommendations, local places to purchase native plants that are recommended for monarchs. Okay, so yes, if you are local to the suburban Chicago area, I am in Will County, just outside Joliet. My preferred place is Possibility Place because it's very close to me and I know everything they have is native. It's native to this area, and they don't treat their plants with insecticides. That's another thing. When you go to buy plants, very frequently those plants have been treated. That's why I really don't recommend buying your plants from big box stores, because they'll tell you they don't treat the plants with anything, but I guarantee you the grower they get them from does. If you're buying a plant and it looks perfectly intact, there's no little holes in it, you know, it's beautiful, it looks perfect, there's a really good chance that plant was treated. And now you're putting it out in your garden to feed these insects that, you know, you're basically feeding them poison food. So make sure wherever you buy your plants from, they've not been treated. So if you're outside of our area, there, you know, again, that's my preferred place. Out of, you know, if we go out more to like DuPage County, there's natural area natives. There's a few other nurseries that are native focused out there. Outside of those areas, you know, wherever and widespread you all are, Michigan, Indiana, I don't know your native nurseries, but it's, you know, so it's worth a little bit of research on your part. However, I do know there are 2 places that will ship that are in Wisconsin and Minnesota. So Prairie Nursery and Prairie Moon Nursery both ship plants. You order them online and they ship them to you. They don't treat everything, well, almost everything I do is native, at least in the Midwest kind of area. So check them out if you're interested. But, you know, it's always worth having a conversation. There is really a push for native plants in this area. So the more pressure we can put on nurserymen, the more options we're going to have. So the more they're going to realize that market is out there, and really the more we're going to be able to find them. So talk to your local nurseries. Let them know you want plants that have not been treated. Let them know you want the wild type and not the cultivars. Let them know you want natives. So just talk, conversations. And you know, you never know, you may find a gem someplace you didn't realize that are taking these steps. All right. Jan says, we live in the country and have lots of milkweed. I've raised monarchs in the past, but never from an egg. This year I raised tiny caterpillar from an egg. I kept new milkweed leaves available, but after a week or so, it stopped eating. What might I have done wrong? You know, it's hard to say. Sometimes, like if it stopped eating and died, it's hard to say. Sometimes the milkweed may have had something on it. You know, even if you didn't treat it with something, maybe a neighbor did and it blew over. If you give your dogs flea and tick medicine and then touch your caterpillars, or you know, like the drops, especially pet your dog and then touch the caterpillars, now you've transferred that flea and tick medicine, which is an insecticide, to your caterpillars. You may not have done anything wrong. Maybe that caterpillar, just there was something wrong with it from the start. Maybe it was just getting ready to shed. I always joke that anytime they're getting ready to shed, it's kind of like changing their clothes, where they like to, you know, kind of go off by themselves, have a little bit of privacy. They stop eating for a little bit, you know, and then you give them time and they'll go right back to it. So it really all depends. Just because it stops eating, it walks away from the leaves or whatever, doesn't always mean there's anything wrong with it. So I think I need a little bit more to the story to really know for sure, but those are some possible things. Patty wants to know, can you move the chrysalis safely? Yes, you can, only if needed. I really try to handle them as little as possible. And anytime I do, I definitely wash my hands first, because again, lotions, things like that anything like that on your hands can harm them. So I really do try to handle them as little as possible. But if the chrysalis, you know, is somewhere that is not really safe for it to be, I had one enclosed basically like under the lip of the container one time, and there was no room for the butterfly to grow. So rather than just leave it there, I very carefully took some thread. You can use dental floss, things like that. Tied a little knot around the top, the cremaster, which is that part of where it connects at the top, where those back legs were basically holding on to the top. Connect that there, tie it sort of in a little knot, and then very, very gently pull it away. They're attached to kind of a spider webby material that they make. And so if you can sort of pull that away, you don't risk damaging the chrysalis. Again, anytime you mess with them like that, there's always the risk. You want to be as careful with it as possible. But that's how I have done it successfully. All right. Any other questions? Let me just kind of go through conversation here. Let's see. I think I got to all of the questions. So with that, I want to thank everybody for coming out today and joining us for our first webinar Wednesday with our conservation online program. Hope to see you all back again next week. Have a great rest of your week and keep looking for those monarchs. So thanks everybody. Have a great day. Bye.